All right, well, officially, bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue, welcome on Zoom and in person to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thanks so much for joining us for Sustainable Opulence. Today, we'll be questioning how the drag community can channel talent and creativity into more collaborative practice based on the principles of sustainability. So exciting. So now that we're settled in, make yourselves comfortable if you've joined us here in the space. And if you're on Zoom, thanks so much for joining us in that space. You're welcome to turn your camera on if you please. I'd like to remind you that we are streaming to YouTube live from Fourth Space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And we'd like to extend our gratitude to the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, who are the caretakers for the lands and waters we're meeting on, for their teachings about the earth and our relations. Quickly, we'll just say, if you're new to Fourth Space and you're wondering what we do here, well, we work with our university community to mobilize and exchange knowledge by co-creating daily activities such as this one. This winter, we've had the pleasure of partnering with Sucker, the Concordia University Center for Creative Reuse, to give some space, physical and otherwise, to their 6 artists in residence. And this event is based on KAJOL's project in development, and we've got some special invited guests joining him today. So what did I want to say? I want to say I'm passing it over to Maya for a few more words about Sucker and the residency program. Hi, Maya.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. So exciting having people interested in these topics and in these practices. So as Anna said, I'm Maya. I'm one of the coordinators at the Concordia University Center for Creative Reuse. So for those who don't know, it's an initiative to divert waste from Concordia's waste stream, materials from Concordia's waste stream, and make them available to the general community free of charge. So we have a material depot full of a huge variety of materials, everything from raw materials, wood, metal, plastic, fabrics, paper, office supplies, all that kind of stuff. And the general community is welcome to come, so feel free to come by. What else? Yeah, so this is our 5th year of an artist residency, which is always been amazing, and it's a really great opportunity for artists to explore sustainability in their practices, but we also really encourage them to just consider the full life cycles of the materials they're using. And it's always a joy to see what diversity there is in the mediums, in their approaches, conceptually, but also materially. And this year it's a bit different. Where in the past it's been in a gallery space, and this year we're at Fourth Space, so it's much more interactive. The artists have been actually using this space as a studio space for the last couple months, and it's also allowed us to give them space to host their own events and bring the public in, which has been amazing. So thank you to Fourth Space, and thank you so much to the artists who, in their very busy lives, have been putting so much amazing work into it. So I'll just introduce Keith, and then I'll pass it over for you guys to introduce yourselves and get started. So Mumbai born, Keith Trevor Fernandez was first inspired to create when his mother took him to an outdoor performance of dancing fountains. At 16, Keith gathered together a sprightly group of creatives to write, direct, and produce an original musical. His pursuits and curiosity for musical theater led him across the pond to Canada, where he graduated from the Grant MacEwan University Theatre Arts program in 2007. Keith worked tirelessly performing in and out of the box musicals at the Edmonton International Fringe Festival, creating opportunities for himself and fellow creatives, directing original musicals, and producing shows like Broadway Backwards, Company, and Bat Boy the Musical. In 2018, he founded Berlin Musicals, a professional music theater company providing performance opportunities to up-and-coming performers in Germany. Keith is currently developing his drag persona, KAJOL, in a new piece of theater entitled Landings, Exploring Sustainability in Drag and Hybrid Identity. Thank you so much, Keith, for being here, and for you guys too. This is Lizzy Strange and Fabien L'Amour. I'll pass it over.
Thank you so much, Maya, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, Fourth Space, for having us here. Thank you, Sucker, for this wonderful opportunity to explore drag through a sustainable lens. I'm super excited to be here, really, and it's been a joyous and really fun and very zen experience. In the chaos of my university term, I have to say this has been a really wonderful, chilled out moment to really explore more than anything, sustainable materials like right until the last minute where they can't be used anymore. And that for me has been really exciting and one of the huge things that I will definitely take away into my practice. Without further ado, I want to introduce my lovely friends here. Lizzy Strange, tell us a little bit about you, Lizzy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lizzy Strange. My pronouns are she, they, and drag. Yeah, so I'm so excited to be here and to get to work with some lovely folks. I have been doing drag now for about 8 years. And I, at the moment, I co-produce Mythos Drag Cabaret at the Diving Bell with Hercules. It is a interdisciplinary drag cabaret where we focus on not just traditional lip sync in drag, but also in other creative outlets, which has been really lovely and fulfilling and really gets me the opportunity to delve into my crafty side, which is really exciting. And that's kind of where my introduction to reusing materials that have had former lives really comes into play. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Fabien.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming on a Wednesday in the middle of the day. It's quite something to get in the middle of the day.
It's so true.
Yeah.
What time did you start?
9:45.
Oh, wow, you're quick.
I was quick. Yeah.
You're very quick.
I suppose, yeah. The beard helps. It's half the face that one doesn't have to paint. But hi, I'm Fabien L'Amour. If you don't speak French, it's kind of a play on words for makes love well, which is kind of my drag character, but more just deconstructing toxic masculinity. And I actually, because of Montreal's small ecosystem of drag, I first saw KAJOL at Mythos, which Lizzy produces, in this amazing David Attenborough praying mantis Broadway starlet number that left me gagged. I'm a baby though. I only started doing drag about 10 months ago. And it's been an amazing journey. I do have a bit of a theater background, and I didn't know that you had this German connection because I lived in Berlin for 4 years. So,
oh, that's wild! I had no idea either.
and they certainly like reusing things over there.
Oh yes,
yeah,
they absolutely do.
But just to cut to the chase, he, him, and drag, and this is one of like 7 or 8 costumes that I've made in my life so far. And if you didn't catch the reference, it's a number about Vincent van Gogh. Yeah, that's
Woo.
me. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you both for being here. I'm super excited to have you both here. I immediately thought of you both, and you reached out to me like absolute kismet, the way that it happened, while I was in the middle of this residency, and you said, hey, it'd be interesting to like bring the community together and think about drag in a sustainable way. I was like, what? How did you know? I haven't even told anybody about this residency, and it was just a natural, like a beautiful way to bring you on board. And I love that you already do this in your practice, you too, Lizzy, and so it's really kind of amazing to have you here to kind of and really to bring it out into our community more than anything, because I know that the three of us are really well connected with our community. Like you said, it's like this beautiful mishmash of weirdos, and we're all pretty well connected. And I think one of the big things when I was first talking to Maya about this residency was the idea of it not just ending with me. I really wanted it to continue to be able to grow, change, and survive and thrive long after I was done this residency. And I think that hopefully through this platform and through this conversation today, we have the chance to be able to do that. I hope so. And so with that being said, let's talk about like when you're creating an act, what are the places that you look to source your materials?
I think I'd start by thinking about my creative process too. A lot of the times for myself, and I know working collaboratively with you and talking with you in the past couple of weeks, we all have kind of similar paths in that we all have the same checklist of things we go through in the creation of a number, but we all arrive at them at different points in time. So for me, inspiration usually strikes while I'm listening to a song, right, or I have a show coming up and I have to figure out what song I want to do. So I listen to my playlists on repeat. until something kind of sparks. And then I'll usually start thinking of like, what is my theater brain turns on, and I will start thinking like, what is the story I'm telling? How do I want to tell it? What does that look like for me? And that's when I start to get into the costuming phase, which is when I start pulling materials. And for a lot of my numbers, it stays in that creation phase until like the very end. For example, I'm working on a number now I've been working on for a month for a show on Friday, and I still have half of the costume to build.
And it's Bjork themed,
It's
right?
Bjork themed. It's very exciting.
Which is, how does that feel when it's a very specific artist and yet you could go anywhere with it?
Yeah. So for me, it was like, which Bjork song am I feeling most attached to right now in my life? That I can pull on. And then also because the show I'm performing at is a horror drag show, it's like, how can I make that spooky, or how can I make that creepy and go into that? So it's this Bjork kind of not avant-garde, but kind of like abstract siren costume that I am working on. And so instantly I'm like, okay, I can't buy this off the rack. That's impossible. And what do I have in my closet? I don't have anything that is specifically mermaid-y. So actually, I went to Sucker, and I looked around, and my first instinct is always to look for fabrics, what fabrics are available. And then also I do a bit of puppeteering in my practice. So also I think about structure and how to build the structures that I need in my costume. So for example, I'm building kind of this puppet tail. So I need some metal fabric to really give the puppet some
like an outer structure, a framework.
Exactly, that's perfect. To give it the framework, and where do I find that? So I went to Sucker, and I found some tarp and some other materials and some kind of mesh fabrics, and I pulled them all home. And this lovely, lovely IKEA lampshade, which you are very familiar with, actually.
I am.
We've been working together for some time, and you kindly offered to help me out with some pieces for this number. So I brought my my IKEA lampshade to KAJOL to decorate for me, which is so lovely of you to offer, and also takes so much off of my own plate. So thank you for that. And we painted it up, and now it's this lovely headpiece.
Bejeweled.
Yeah, it's bejeweled, and it looks
Cajoled.
so good. Cajoled,
if you will.
Oh, I'm stealing that. Thank you. Thank you. So I start to pull, to get back to your question, my long-winded answer. I start to pull it when I start to think of the costume, and the costume isn't always strict in my mind. Like it kind of changes with what materials are available to me at that time.
But that's great that you're inspired by what you see in front of you. And I think it's interesting. Look, we collaborated on this, and I was like, okay, great. What are the other colors in your, we saw this ridiculous IKEA lampshade, and then you said, okay, I'm going to put it on my head. Great. So we established that was happening. And then I said, what are the other colors that are in your like wheelhouse? And so white and gold were like, and like definitely sparkle is never a bad thing when you're on stage. And so it was a very highly collaborative kind of effort, I feel like, to just kind of go back and forth and be like, okay, great, what do you need in order for this to be able to kind of really work for your act? And that in itself is interesting to me, because then I had things at home that I could reuse immediately in order to be able to take that to the next level. And that level of collaboration for me doesn't always happen in our practice. It often feels, at least to me, feels like a very solitary kind of experience. We're sitting in our own worlds, in our apartments in like a corner, building these things. But I think the more minds that we bring into the conversation, the more exciting it is, because people look at things differently and they imagine things differently. I mean, the creativity is always there with drag minds, and so it's kind of cool to like bring people into a situation that way and be like, hey, what do you see in this? Where do you see it living on me? This is, and like you've described your number to us. So I think that in itself is also a great point of a point of inspiration to be able to jump off and be able to reuse things or see things in a different light than they would usually be seen. And that itself, for me, is kind of cool. Fabien, how about you? What do you do in your practice that you would say in terms of like sourcing materials, other certain places that you like to go? Are you gifted things magically by like the drag community?
Yeah, my 4 R's are the reduce, reuse, recycle, and Renaissance. And if people aren't from Montreal, this is a thrift store chain. And I got this men's suit for $10 and painted it. And it was many hours, of course. But I do source a lot of stuff from Renaissance. And yes, people do gift me things now that I've started. I do tend to choose specific characters in pop culture. So Magic Mike, Michael Myers, Steve from Stranger Things, Van Gogh. I want to do Vladimir Putin, Gaston from Disney. And these all have a very specific visual identity. So people, when they know that I want to do these numbers, they kind of think of me. And my friend, for example, May is a beading artist, and she did this in the Northwest Territories. And when she knew I was doing Vincent van Gogh, she asked me, could this be of any use to you? Like, could you find a way of putting that? And I thought it would be perfect to, cover his ear. That would be a really nice addition. And she already had it made, but the colors were just so perfect. And
it's stunning,
right?
I mean, it's completely on theme, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like a mini version of the painting.
And to wear, like, this number is very personal to me. So to have even like another piece of someone I love,
someone else's art,
part of the costume,
absolutely. That's really special and very like again highly collaborative, all coming together in the same way. I love that. That's so cool. Yeah.
What about you? Where do you source your materials?
What do I source my materials? So it completely depends on who I'm surrounded with, honestly. And this is amazing. So when I was working on the workshop of my show Landings, I remember thinking, okay, I have this moment where I'm a flight attendant, and I'm telling this story about being a flight attendant, going to go get some visa work done, and I'm in my flight attendant's uniform, but it's drag, so it's highly exaggerated. And so I knew that I wanted something that was going to be hidden under a costume. So a friend of mine gave me a little like flasher jacket, which was super cute. Again, my drag sister was able to like kind of give me that, which is amazing. And then I needed something that like took it to the next level. And Lisa was around, and so I was like, okay, great. Can I please have like a little something? Do you have a little something in your closet to be able to kind of take it to that place? And you had this giant pink like ribbon.
It's technically a belt. I had this this lovely little romper that was gifted to me by a really dear friend of mine, and I used it in a number for brunch like not too long before we started working on that project together. And it was a belt, and I needed something to cover up cleavage, so I took it up and wore it as a scarf, and I was like, oh, that would kind of work for what you're explaining to me.
Absolutely.
Take it.
And it did. And it was so easy. The beauty of it was that being able to have that conversation and for people to understand what you conceptually were trying to bring together, and then say, oh yeah, I have this in my closet. I have this in my closet. Great. And so already we had kind of started that conversation about being able to share things, which I know was something that we had talked about very early in our conversations about what we wanted to share with our community, was this idea of being able to share the things that we do. Because let's be honest, drag is so expensive, and there's this huge kind of this huge pressure to be able to show up, and like you said, drag is we have such strong visual identities that people expect us to look a certain way when we show up. And it's very hard to think of that. Sustainability is not always built into that practice. It's like something that we really need to like everything else. It's like a muscle. We gotta like flex it in order to be able to kind of incorporate it a bit more into our drag. And I think that collaboration is a really beautiful way to be able to kind of flex that muscle of sustainability, is to think sustainably, but through this idea of collaborating and be like, okay, great, what can we share? Sorry,
Absolutely.
jump in.
And historically, that's also been the case, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, from ball culture that kind of bled into drag culture, you have drag houses, drag families, drag siblings, and which is chosen family that you gravitate towards in your practice. And when I moved to Montreal, actually, I moved in with one of my drag family members, and we had another one come and join us in our little apartment in Verdun. And one of our rooms ended up being our drag closet, which was like combined with all three of us. And it was lovely. I had like 20 wigs available to me, and now I have 3 now that she's moved on to Toronto. But that desire to share and trade, there was a couple pictures that we had up here of this dress. Actually, I don't know if you can see it on Zoom, but it's this wedding gown that I was gifted. A queen in Halifax named Miss Vicky was working at a bridal store that went out of business. Yeah. Thank you. Oh my goodness, my words. And I ended up dyeing it she gave it to a friend of mine, and I ended up dyeing it because it was white. And I was like, this is very obviously a wedding dress. I dyed it this light blue and wore it for a pageant in Halifax. But then when I moved here to Montreal, I had the opportunity to do a duet with my drag fam, Fawn Darling, and we did Elphaba and Galinda from Wicked. And it was a perfect little Galinda dress. And then a couple months later, I did it with another friend, Pythia, which is also in the photo cycles here. And it got to the point where I'd worn it so much. If I wore it again, it'd be like, okay, this is like, I've worn it 3 times in a year or something like that, which fairly high profile gigs. And so actually my drag niece, Damone Lestrange, borrowed it because she wanted to do a Wicked number. And in exchange, I borrowed her costume, which is also in the photos here. And it's a little Bob Mackie replica number of one of like Cher's costumes. So I got to borrow that to do a Liza Minnelli outfit.
Okay.
Yeah,
amazing.
which was lovely.
There you go. Go ahead, Fabien. Jump in. I saw you had.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you, and historically we were talking about ballroom culture, and specifically queens have a different challenge. I think kings and queens face different obstacles, and typically drag kings and folks like trying to pass as men had costumes to make them look like kind of working class and the plumbers and the mechanics, whereas drag queens and folks walking in balls to pass as women are always have this pressure to be elevated and look rich, like eleganza,
hyper femme, yeah.
And how does that work for you in your practice? This pressure to, look expensive when you're sourcing materials that might not be 100% organza silk. I'm so ignorant when it comes to fabrics, but do you know what I mean? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. Look, I've gone down many routes in terms of exploring this. So I've gone down the route of working with a costume designer and building things directly from scratch, and like having them conceptualizing something with the designer and then making it come to life. And that was a completely different practice because we went out and sourced a ton of materials in order to be able to kind of do that. Organza, like up the wazoo, in order to make that happen. Yeah. And at the same time, when I did, for example, that number that you saw at Mythos, I was like, well, we have a very short period of time. We had like less than 2 weeks. And I'm the kind of artist as well, like you. I'll firstly be inspired by the music, by a song, and then connect it with the story, and then go from there. And like, I'm all about the performance. That's my musical theater side. I can't help get rid of that, and I never will. No. But that's okay. But yeah, so in that case, I went a sucker too, and I sourced a bunch of materials as I imagined the look coming together. And I'd go specifically to look for things. I'd have a really good wander around there and pick things up and physically kind of imagine what they would look like. I remember picking up 2 foam half balls and thinking, oh yeah, these could be eyes. And then imagining how that could be built into the existing wardrobe that I already had. And I thought, okay, great, this bug is green. What do I have that's green? What do I have that could make it green, for example? Right? And then what does Sucker have that's green? And then
what is Sucker? But other than a Jonas Brothers song. I know what it is, but maybe here.
Sucker is the Concordia Center for Creative Reuse. So it's this lovely resource that is sponsoring, is hosting you as an artist in residence, but it's Basically, if you go around different fine arts buildings at Concordia, you'll find huge containers. And when students are done with their projects, whether it be in fiber arts, whether it be in theater, whether it be in, those are the two departments that I've actually been in. So any other one, you put your goods that you were done with, your paper, your cassette tapes, your Macbeth costume, your what are these? These are
when you have like different outcomes in
cleaners.
classes,
Pipe cleaners.
like very often like the design students have huge outcomes that are be all and end all. Like they're done for a single class. Oops,
I got you.
All right, thank you.
You're molting?
I'm molting. No, it's my microphone. Thank you.
No worries.
So yeah, just for example, when the design students have a specific outcome, this wig that I made, we were given the opportunity, for example, to build a wig completely from found items. And I went to Sucker and I found several giant bags of those, what are they called?
Pipe cleaners.
Pipe cleaners, thank you. And I was like, great, I'm gonna do it. And then I just did a ton of research, really. And I think that research really helps support this idea of sustainability because we're not reinventing the wheel here. Like we talked about, this has been done. Club kids have done this forever, right? They lived in these like communal houses way back in the day in New York. And every single night they couldn't afford, they would go out every single night and they'd want a brand new look every single night. Because I think, the euphoria of like going out and showing up and the pressure of like having to look great in drag is a very real, is a very real thing. And the pressure of running into the same people again is a very real thing in the same look. So how do you do that? Well, you, as a community, come together and you share the items that you have. Share the items that you have, but reimagine them. But don't reimagine them alone. Reimagine them with people around you, right? If you've got a concept and an idea to start with, think about, okay, great, I've got this like pharaoh look that I'm gonna try and build, this like Cleopatra number, for example. Great, who in the room has all the gold in the world, right? Where can I like solicit the gold from your beard, the gold from your beads, for example, right?
Which I think is like where Sucker comes in and is such like an invaluable resource because you can go, they're open, I think is it 3 days a week?
3 days a week at the moment.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone in the audience. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And you can book a time. You can be a student. You can be a community member. You can be anyone. You go online to the website and you can book a 15-minute appointment. And I am the first to admit that I am guilty of going over that 15 minutes while I'm... Okay, they're saying it's okay. You just say when you're going to arrive and you go and it's this kind of basement workshop where all of those items from the bins are there and available for you, and it changes every time you go. When I went that last time, there was the IKEA headpiece, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with that, but I need to take that home with me. And I found foam to make puppets before, and I found it's you don't know what you're gonna find when you get there, but it's kind of this lovely center to go in.
That's
and get
the
all
joy
these.
of it. That's the joy of it, is being inspired by exactly what's in the room rather than going in with a very set idea. Because the set idea is what is a bottleneck, right? You end up in this idea of being like, no, I need to use like materials. And of course, I think so much of what we're inspired by in the drag world as well is heavily built in that kind of material based world, like with fabrics primarily. And so to be able to really think outside the box, you do need time for sure. To be able to kind of give your mind the time to think, to reset, to reimagine what things can look like. I'm going to draw attention to like the things that like Maya and Ariane and I talked about when very, very early in the process, and that I stuck with. I'm happy to say like I pretty much stuck to my guns and let it kind of reveal what it could do in terms of drag practice for me. So I'm going to kind of like draw attention to a couple of things that I definitely found there. So obviously those are from tapes, lots and lots of cassettes. And I just considered, okay, great. You know what? It has a lot of elements that would really be great for drag. It's shiny, it moves. It also is like relatively sculptural. It has depth to it. And so I was able to create a lot of things around it, even just behind y'all. I was able to.
Oh, here, let me model
we
it.
built this like beautiful. So Lizzy Strange and I built this giant human loom, thanks to like the lovely people at Sucker and these beautiful blocks that they have in this space. We built these gorgeous, we were able to kind of build this natural fringe, and it moves really incredibly. It also like covers things really well. So like it could be used as a reveal coat. It could be used as a top if you wanted, or a bottom, or a skirt.
A wig.
A wig, even.
Well,
That's true. If you want your Ariana Grande fantasy like wig.
Ponytail.
That's right. You could totally go there. So like the versatility of it is unbelievable. And it's kind of crazy to think that it's cassette tapes, you know? And so I had a blast working with that. It was a really like strong point of inspiration for me during the course of the process.
It was so fun.
It was so fun. And I mean, we used a giant, like literally one of these tables stacked up on each other, and literally went around like chipmunks.
Spent like a good 2 hours.
Created a loom for like
trading
2 hours
off and just
in order to make like such long, like, you know, strands of kind of fringe, really.
Yeah.
So I was thinking of things that already exist in the world that we already love, like fringe, and thinking about how they could live in these different materials. Another thing that I never thought in my life I would use, but has been really fun to use, is binders. So binders, of course, like are like more and more outdated as things go along. Not in Germany, where I used to live, where they still keep things for like 15 years. It's kind of wild in binders. But binders have all this vinyl around them. And Ariane was like so swift and like swathy about it that we were able to kind of uncover how much vinyl there is in a single like binder. And it's kind of amazing because one side is glossy, one side is matte. They come in different colors. You can paint them if you really want. And so I was able to kind of create like this weird little headpiece. Yes, of course you face challenges in terms of like, how is it going to weigh on my head? How is it going to sit on my head? How am I going to keep it up? And then I think I remember talking to you and we were talking about drag kings, and I was like, well, you could always flip it around and turn it into a beard, and that could be kind of cool.
Yeah, I might borrow that.
Yeah, please, it's all yours. And so, but it, honestly, it was so easy to kind of create. But it was just a question of like me sitting with the materials long enough to be able to imagine it in different ways. And that's what was the game changer for me, right? Is thinking of these things outside of just the way that they exist in the world, and also think of them completely beyond their like final life cycle, where they often is just so short-lived. That was an exciting part of the process for me. But yeah, speaking of the process, I'm one of the major things that I really wanted to take away was what do you think are some ideas and some ways that we can mobilize our community in continuing to continue this practice of sustainability within our drag practice without losing the so-called opulence of it all, but things that we love to see, the things that our audiences and our fans and our Instagram followers, if you will, want to see, all 200 of them for me. But yeah, I'm curious to know what some of the ideas you think we could kind of share.
You referenced it earlier, social media, sort of, sometimes it doesn't always feel like our best friend, but in our case, I did post a story where I was just having these ruminations, like, I'm trying to be minimalist in life, and yet the art of drag seems to counter that. So how do I was just sort of asking a question out into the ether, and then you saw that, and that's what led to these discussions. And a few times in building numbers, I've just like put out stories like, hey, I don't want to buy a whole a construction vest. Right. I'm sure someone out there has one, and sure enough, they pop up. So we were discussing like taking this idea of shared costume pieces, but maybe creating some sort of library or common storage facility. It doesn't just have to be for drag artists, it can be for theater artists, musicians.
It can be for all artists, really.
Yeah. Of course, that's a big logistical puzzle of where you store this stuff and how you make sure things are maintained and not broken and it's fair, and do you ask for a payment, etc. There's things to figure out, but it seems like a very exciting endeavor that we can all
absolutely
hop
I couldn't
on.
Agree more.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
We also talked a bit about in discussions leading up to this chat here today about how there are different skills that every drag artist has that others do not, or interests that drag artists have. Like you mentioned that you have no interest in, or maybe not no interest, but you find sewing to be very laborious.
I'm learning to sew.
Oh, awesome.
But my literal sister, not my drag sister, has been teaching me, and it's
a lot of work.
It's an incredible skill in life, let alone drag. I think, the future is people making their own clothes. But it is something that I want to work on, and I have skills to share and trade.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And I know that, myself, I've also taken costume setting courses. So like that idea of sharing and teaching and learning from each other about different things that we like to do. Like I'm not a fan of stoning, but I know that you love a good
sticking rhinestones
moment. For me, I'm like, that's so meticulous and I don't have time for it.
I absolutely love it.
But I think sourcing those materials and then knowing how to put them together and sharing that information, or even sharing those skill sets, is such an important skill.
Yeah.
So in addition to like the sharing resources, sharing knowledge and sharing skill sets is important.
I completely agree. Sharing of skill sets, I think, is like a very incredible way to like be able to think sustainably, because one person's vision of what you can do with a certain item is completely different from what somebody else can imagine and physically actually get in there and do. I love the idea that you mentioned, this idea of like maximalism. Honestly, with an item like that, for example, like the cassette tape, maximalism is your best friend because it gives you volume, it gives you drama, it like totally buys into things, and you get to use more of the item that you're actually using. And then once you have so much of it, you already have so much to pull from for whatever you imagine it going into next, right? Because you've already got the basis of something to build on. One of my big inspirations that I shared with both of you was Machine Dazzle, who creates these fabulous wigs and like complete costume items completely from found and shared items. Not a single thing is bought, down to like shoes, right? And it's kind of amazing because it's just completely a mindset of thinking, great, these are things that I have, these are things that are shared with me, these are things that are found or can be reused. And they completely let it inspire the process and go balls to the wall in terms of maximalism. Keep going bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's the one thing that I wish I had more time in this residency, because I would just go nuts with how much I was able to kind of create. Because I think up until the point that we had like a good 3 months to be able to kind of explore. But I know that if I had more time, I would just be able to sit with things more and just add on, and be inspired by more things at the recycling center. And so that in itself, I think, is a really fun practice. And sharing a skill, being like, okay, great. I'm like a pretty decent like sewer, and so that's a skill that I can totally share for somebody that's wondering how to use like a bunch of patchwork pieces of like fabric or other items, that's found items that they've kind of have available to them. And so I think that's quite special. We are coming close to the end of our little thing. Would you like to share any other kind of ideas really quickly with our community? Jump in.
I would. I actually noticed through social media, which is such a great tool, in Toronto, they had recently at Glad Day Bookshop, they hosted a glitter exchange, which I think is a great idea, which is kind of like a ski swap or like a sporting goods swap, where members of the community, and not just drag folks, but all sorts of folks, could bring in their used clothing or costume pieces or what have you, and do kind of like a trade-off, which we do have markets that exist in Quebec today. Usually there's an annual drag sale where local merchants bring their goods and then they share them once a year at Mado. But also thinking about using those spaces for community exchange too, I think is really important, where it's not necessarily like, here is this finished garment, buy it for this much, or here is this wig, buy it for this much, but like, hey, I have this thing and it's unfinished, or I am done using it at the present moment. But I see that you have this other thing that I'm interested in. Do you want to swap? Do you think this is a fair trade? There's those details to be worked out, but that interesting thing, very similar to kind of sharing with your friends through drag,
Yeah.
but like in a more kind of even opening your closet even more.
Absolutely. And I think this will also feed well into like items, things that we can share for kings, for things, for creatures, people that are not just ultra femme presenting, because I feel like so much of that kind of work lives in this ultra femme kind of drag world that we're very aware of. But like, what about all the other pieces of our community that are incredibly important to the community and that also are looking for ways to build community, meet other people, and also share their things and find new ways to kind of be inspired? I think that like those community kind of events could be a super interesting way to meet people and to share skills, share ideas, and share the clothing that we're in and that we've used and that we're ready to say,
Ready to part with. Absolutely.
or ready to reimagine even with new eyes. And I think that's kind of special. But yeah. Any last parting words before we?
Any ideas?
Well, if any of you have never really stopped to think about it, I sorely underestimated how interdisciplinary drag is as an art form. And we've mentioned a lot of aspects of costuming. Some have gone unnamed, like learning makeup, wig styling, jewelry making, prop building. That's something that I really like doing. But then there's the other skills that we can get together, and I'm ému. I am époustouflée. I am gobsmacked at how supportive and lovely folks in drag are. And I think there's like a literal element of survival there and queer allyship, but you're never alone in drag, and that's really inspiring. And so I would encourage anyone who is a baby drag artist or who like just sees the drag community and thinks, hey, you know what, I'm a good photographer, maybe I could just offer these folks a photo shoot. And it's really nice how people have approached me and offered different things, and vice versa. I have 4 baby drag brothers who I've helped teach makeup to, and I barely know anything myself, but it's really nice to come together and fumble through the dark together. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's true. I completely agree. All right, thank you. I think that's a beautiful
Thank you so
note
much
to end on. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to open up to questions if you have any.
We'd like questions.
And maybe I'll just add, for the folks on Zoom, don't be shy. You're more than welcome to jump in as well. And
yes,
if you
please
prefer to use the chat, we can read out your questions or comments there. For the folks in the space, just let us know you'd like to speak. We'll have to borrow one of those handheld mics so that we can hear you. Thank you.
How many cassette tapes did it take to make that wig?
I think well over 40. It's about 40. Yeah.
Where did you find those cassette tapes?
At Sucker. There's a giant box of them, and I was like,
Is there any left?
Yes, there's
still some
There's
left.
plenty left, right? There's still plenty left. I know, that's the beauty of it, right? Is if I had more time, I would continue to be able to explore things in a different way with those cassette tapes. And we use them. There's another piece of that we built. So like the actual cassette tapes, we kind of thought, well, we've taken out all the like actual physical cassette tapes from within the pieces. What are we gonna do with it? And so Lizzy had this idea to turn it into a purse. And it's in its early stages, but I think it's pretty cool. But they'll bring it over. And again, it's this idea of thinking, okay, great, how are we gonna use the item in its completion? And so we built this really fun little like purse. And it's a binder. It's nothing but a binder. And so it's, but yeah, just a question of like somebody else seeing it differently, through different eyes, and then imagining what it could look like, right? And yeah. Go ahead.
Great. First, I want to thank all of you for how much you've thought about sustainability in your practices, how much you're already practicing. It's amazing to see that. Keith, hats off and all of that to you for what you've been able to do.
Thank you for having me.
With the materials. It's great to see somebody taking binders and going in a completely interesting and amazing direction with them. I do want to mention that over the 6 years that Sucker has been around, other reuse centers have come to us when they've been starting up. one of them called Ecoseno, which is one that deals with theater more like set waste in Montreal.
Oh, that's cool.
But they might be an interesting place to connect with about this idea of having a library of costumes and so on that could connect both worlds, the theater and drag world together. So again, bravo. It's amazing to see what you all have done.
All right. Thank you. Thank you everybody on Zoom as well for joining us. Thank you, Lizzy. Thank you, Fabien, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Oh, still have time? If we still have time, I'll ask something.
Oh, go for it. I apologize. Okay, I wasn't sure about time. My bad.
Okay, many things you've been like, specific materials you've been talking about, I'm like, little bells are ringing in my head. Something, when you said glitter swap, I was like picturing a bunch of people getting together, like trading glitter. And we have like a box that we keep tucked away far in the corner of glitter because glitter is like the ultimate microplastic. It's like so problematic and it gets everywhere in everything we have. So I was just like, yeah, it just had me thinking about like for impact, just seeing like the parts on your clothing that are shiny and like catch the eye. I'm just like, I wonder if there's a way of having impact and like that effect without turning to plastic all the time. And like for sure, when we reuse like old plastic, it's better than the alternative,
right?
Like buying a new piece of plastic. But yeah, that just came to mind. Like when I look at like truly the material, all the material that there is in the world that already exists and how problematic some of them are.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I wonder like what that makes you think about and your approaches to plastic and all
Absolutely. Of that. I was doing my makeup this morning and putting on primer and thinking about how my old primer used to have like those little microplastic beads in them, and how there's been some conversation happening, especially in the cosmetic community. You can't talk about drag without talking about makeup and glitter, and thinking about what you're consuming and what you're buying, because every piece of makeup that I own in my little makeup kit, which is quite a bit now, is something that I've gone out and bought for myself, for the most part. And you think about the sustainability of that and what you're putting on your face first off, but also what the life of it is after you wash it off your face. And there is like that movement of people sourcing out bio glitter too, which is phenomenal and gorgeous on stage. But it's not as readily available as all those the microplastics. So it's thinking about that and what we're consuming too as drag artists, which I will be the first one to say that not everything in my closet is sustainable. I've gone and bought stuff off the rack, and I think it's not so much about making sure everything in your closet at this point is sustainable, but also about how you can work through sustainable processes and sourcing your things in a more sustainable way. And even if you're just at the start of that journey, thinking about how you can include that for each number that you're creating or for each new show that you're encountering. I think it's really important to continue to push yourself in that way.
Yeah, in my minimalist approach to my own wardrobe, I sort of apply that logic to creating costumes. If I'm just gonna I'm gonna do a number only once, I'm not gonna go buy all these new things and resources. But to come back to your glitter comment, it's interesting how I, myself, and probably a lot of other people associate drag with glitz and glamour and sparkle. And there is a little bit of gatekeeping, even little details like, oh, you're a king and you're not putting on lashes, like your eyes are just totally gonna fade. And then it's like, oh, I have to buy lashes now? But the glitter thing, it's true. I've noticed that I have more of an impact on stage when I'm shiny, but there are much more sustainable ways of doing that. Like this stuff I put on my beard is a bioplastic, or bio glitter, which I think is seaweed based. And I saw this incredible, again, social media as a resource, someone had made a headpiece out of old CDs, and the light on stage, it just reflected beautifully. And sadly, CDs are going out the way of the dinosaurs that they were made of. I always think about plastic as being dead dinosaurs, like the millions of years of life on Earth that just became what we use for plastic. But it is an interesting conversation, and I wonder if at times there should be more awareness in the drag community about the cost of everything, literal and metaphorical. There's a question back there. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, I'm curious, especially in terms of maybe talking with older drag artists, especially like how shows like Drag Race has sort of changed the way that we expect like a full drag look to be and like what pieces it has to include. And especially thinking like when you're starting out, how do you decide when a drag look is finished? Because I just started and I feel like I have a vision and then ends up I like am giving up about 50% by like deadline time.
Right.
I have the mic so close to my face. I have so many things to say on this. First off, before you give the mic back, what's your drag name?
Areola Grande.
Areola
Oh my God, yes! I followed you the other day.
recognize
Hello.
you.
Yes,
I
I
didn't
came
recognize
because
the
I was
past.
like, I need to know things about wigs.
Absolutely. As someone who started in 2015, which is right, I think when that was season 6, that was when everything kind of really took off. First off, I don't think your costume is ever gonna be completely done. Yeah.
I'm so self-conscious about my shoes. I'm like, why aren't my shoes all painted and bedazzled? But
I'm like, why
who
aren't I
cares?
more glittery? And then, yeah, anyways. Second
I
off,
don't know what you're talking about.
I think
No,
I
I'm just
think
kidding.
with
But
Drag Race, I will preface this by saying I started drag because of Drag Race, because I watched Drag Race. And I think so many artists now are in that position or have been influenced by it. You can't not be influenced by it at this point, I think in North America especially. Drag Race has brought so many things with it that is, for myself, wildly problematic. But to name a few in the realms that we're talking about today about sustainability, it's brought this sort of commodification that comes with it and this heightened, flawless presence that I think not only makes drag wildly unaffordable and unobtainable in a lot of positions if you take Drag Race as the holy gospel for drag, but also it's highly limiting on what you can explore as a drag artist. And I think that idea, I want to put emphasis on artist, because if we all try to look like the queens on Drag Race, and I have friends on Drag Race, so if we all try to look like this idea of what a commodified drag queen looks like according to RuPaul, I don't think we're ever going to have a show that is diverse enough to enjoy, unless you enjoy just like that background music playing constantly for 3 hours. All that to say, I think the most impressive and impeccable drag that I've ever seen is those artists who you would never see on Drag Race. Like the numbers that I have left the deepest impression on me are like out of this world surreal and deeply thought out and deeply considered a lot of the time and immaculately and there's been a lot of time that goes into it. Not to say that anything that appears on Drag Race doesn't have that, but just thinking about the drag persona and the stories that are being told, I think is much more important as an artist than trying to attain this overly ridiculous,
yeah,
like Barbie doll drag queen.
And like any television show, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we don't see. And
absolutely.
So many of the looks are paid, like other designers will do them. And it's even a challenge in the competition that some queens have a huge budget, and then you have a queen like Kimi Couture on the last season of Canada's Drag Race, who was amazing, but she was like, I'm broke, like I can't afford these.
Or like Pythia
costumes.
was like, who we all know, who is like
A Montreal queen,
a Montreal icon, and her lead up to performing on Drag Race was she's a costume queen, so she was able to build a lot of her things, but she also, I know for a fact, sourced community help, outsourced some costumes, and it was quite like the toll. It's not one person creating that USC on Drag Race that TV wants you to believe. It is really this kind of community gathering that we've been discussing for the past hour that happens in order to get to that. But at the same time, no one person could do that.
It's a heck of a lot of pressure in order to be able to show up in a certain way, absolutely. The one thing that I'll always say is you will find your identity as in drag purely by exploring what it means to you. Yeah, you can be inspired by things around you. That is completely fine and perfectly normal as an artist, and great as an artist, right? I love Sacha Velour. I love Machine Dazzle. I'm obsessed with them because of what they bring to the art form, but I don't aspire to look like them at all because I'm me. And that for me is an interesting kind of exploration in itself, right? I'm still figuring me out. I'm like 37 years in and still figuring this out. I came to drag as well, really in a weird kind of way. I've lived in countries where it was completely illegal to be queer. And then for the first time, when I moved to Berlin, I was completely liberated. And at my first Pride, I was like, well, this is amazing that people get to live in their fullness. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna go and drag. And I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I was completely inspired by like, okay, great. I'm just gonna explore me. And I gave myself the time to be able to kind of do that. And sure, I was watching Drag Race and stuff at the time. I was also surrounded by artists that really, that community, for example, in Berlin, is 100% like very sustainably kind of focused. They don't ever buy things. They share things up the wazoo. Everyone's like sliding into each other's DMs all the time, being like, hey, can I borrow this? This was really cute on you. Do you mind if I borrow it for a weekend? And that's great, right? Please just reach out if you ever feel like you're stuck and you're like, what do I do? Because I think that's way more fun to kind of meet somebody new that is interested in it. I mean, you just like completely entered my world because all of a sudden like you were interested in this, right? And I love that. And you got in touch with me and you were like, how on earth do you do this with wigs? And that's a very great, that stirred an exploration for me, right? It's like, okay, great, I have these things in front of me. What do I do? How do I explore wigs with them? And that's great, right? But it's that kind of conversation that like will start something out. And then I can come to you and be like, hey, did you see anything that you like that will work with something that you want? Come borrow it. Like,
Absolutely.
Or it's yours, you know? And that for me is really fun.
I think that we live in such a weird microcosm in Quebec where there's this, you have the French language, you have the English language, you have other people who fall in between, and there's like this breakdown of communication, and there's gatekeeping which happens in our community that further divides us all. And I think that it's time for us to purposefully make that stop. And
unite.
Yeah. Like beyond the commercial thing that we happens every Pride, like actually like every month of the year, like why are we not talking? Why are we not in constant communication? Why do I still know where all my costume pieces are? Like they should be lost in the ether somewhere, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which hopefully today helps
we
that
start
a
that
little bit more.
conversation up a bit more. Yeah, absolutely.
Folks, I hate to I really hate to do
it's
this.
fine. I
hate
looked at
it.
the time too.
I
Thank
hate
you.
it. But we are, can we just please, round of applause for this conversation?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome to stick around and continue the conversation kind of offline, but we do have to set up for another event and for starting in half an hour. So I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your insights. It's been absolutely wonderful to meet you all and have you in Fourth Space. Thank you for those online. Thank you for the audience here in person. And we'll see you in half an hour for another Fourth Space extravaganza. Thanks, everybody.
Extravaganza. Thank you.